No tornadic activity that is expected as we head through the rest of the evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Krissy Vann in for Gary Archibald on this very active day across the prairies. Look at this. Storms bubbling up throughout southern Manitoba. In fact, severe thunderstorm warnings and watches issued for many communities. Brandon, you have been added to the severe thunderstorm warning. So let's just talk quickly about the difference between watches and warnings. Watches means there is the potential of that severe weather developing. If you are in a warning, it means that that is happening or imminent. So take cover. The biggest threat with these storms that we're seeing, especially these ones that are pushing really east, is heavy localized flooding. Quite a possibility as there are torrential downpours and very high rains. We had Helen call our storm line from Winnipeg, and she was reporting torrential downpours about 30 minutes or so ago. We are in a severe thunderstorm watch still for areas Sydney, Sandy Lake, and as mentioned, Brandon, you are part of the severe thunderstorm warning, and that risk, unfortunately, will not be dissipating as we head through the latter half of this evening. In fact, severe weather quite possible throughout southeastern Saskatchewan in through southwestern Manitoba. And not the only place that we're seeing active weather in the west. We do have a risk of non-severe isolated thunderstorms throughout the foothills of Alberta and the BC interior. I know there were reports in Abbotsford of some lightning, which is also a really big threat when you do have those thunderstorms. In fact, in Ontario, I believe it was just last week, we had a bunch of golfers that were injured after a lightning strike there. So this is the system that's causing your big mess. And then you can see this next low, that's going to be arriving around Saturday evening, overnight into Sunday. And as those collide, that is why things are so unsettled right across the prairies and into the west. Through Saturday, the main risk of severe weather, that's going to be pushing further east. So you can see it moves out of Saskatchewan and moves towards southeastern Manitoba. Northwestern Ontario is going to be added to that as well. The biggest risk north of Kenora. And again, these heavy rains is what we're really watching for. So you can see this swath of storms, some of them looking quite potent. And we're really keeping an eye on what's coming out of the states with this as well, because they're looking like very potent storms bringing plenty of rain, hence why Environment Canada has issued this rainfall warning. So areas Winnipeg, you're within this, Brandon included. A really large portion of Manitoba. Some areas could get upwards of 70 millimeters of rain, all said and done. Good news if you're in BC, that rain is going to be clearing out for you. Any tornado watches or warnings ahead of this activity. Good news, though, no tornadic activity is expected. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Krissy Vann in for Gary Archibald on this very active evening, particularly through the prairie provinces. We've had these line of thunderstorms moving up from the south and causing torrential downpours in many areas. In fact, take a look at the bottom of your screen. If you are seeing that red ticker, there are multiple severe thunderstorm warnings and watches. For example, Brandon was just added not too long ago to that severe thunderstorm warning, and you can see why. We do have this potent band of storms, very heavy downpours and high winds also associated with this. We're keeping a close eye to the south, though, because everything down here looking even more potent, so we have the risk of seeing localized flooding. Small hail is certainly something we can't rule out, and with severe thunderstorms, I know a lot of you communicating with us wondering about the tornado risk. It's not looking likely, but with severe thunderstorms, can never rule out the possibility. Now, the severe thunderstorm watch again includes areas like Sandy Lake, Sydney. There have been multiple watches and warnings dropping and then being added throughout the evening, and that threat of severe weather not going anywhere this evening. You can see through southeastern Saskatchewan into southwestern Manitoba and really just continuing to push northeastward. And then we do have a slight risk of isolated non-severe thunderstorms through the foothills of Alberta as well. The BC interior could be seeing some of that activity. Now, Saskatchewan, you were in a rainfall warning yesterday. Those have been dropped, but Alberta still dealing with that threat of very heavy rainfall. All said and done, some areas could be seeing 50+ millimeters and even locally higher with these thunderstorms. So Winnipeg, if you were planning the Canada Day barbecue, you can see quite unsettled throughout your weekend. It's Tuesday where things finally start to improve for you, but as you can see, quite a cool down for you in the forecast. We're looking at active weather this evening across the prairies as well to the west of us. Alberta had its second confirmed tornado of 2014. Hi, I'm Krissy Vann in for Gary Archibald. I want to mention that tornado happened south of Cremona, about 16 kilometers south. Just speaking with our team here, and there is some rotation in the area of Airdrie. But so far, it doesn't look like there's a very high shear, so it doesn't look like it will be producing a tornado. But definitely be aware in that area. You could have some torrential downpours as well as some hail associated with this. We'll be keeping a close eye for you here at the Weather Network. Then to the prairies, you can see through southern Alberta, we have this swath of thunderstorms that is bringing heavy downpours, localized flooding, certainly a concern. And you can see this track continues to push northeast. So the threat throughout Saskatchewan, still seeing some activity, but definitely the main focus is on Manitoba. In fact, multiple watches and warnings already in place. You can see severe thunderstorm watch for Sandy Lake, Sydney, Brandon also included in a severe thunderstorm warning, and that risk is going to continue throughout the evening right in through southwestern Manitoba. Coming up, more details on all this active weather that we're seeing in the prairies.
Visit our new and
as well. Due to the low shear, it doesn't appear that it will produce a tornado, but heavy downpours, hail, certainly a threat. And you can keep it here at the Weather Network for the latest. I'm Krissy Vann in for Gary Archibald on this active evening through the prairie provinces. You can see, particularly Manitoba, we have this swath of storms. Now, some good news, some of your severe thunderstorm warnings throughout this really western part of Manitoba. Most of those have been dropped, but as you push northeast, we still have multiple severe thunderstorm watches and warnings still in place. A warning means it is imminent or occurring. A watch means the potential or threat of that severe weather is quite possible. Now, we have the severe thunderstorm watches in place for Sandy Lake, Sydney also included in that, and your threat of severe weather will be continuing throughout the evening hours. So southeastern Saskatchewan, southwestern Manitoba, those are the areas we'll really be focusing on, but you can see there's sort of this widespread risk of some isolated non-severe thunderstorms as well, keeping a close eye on the foothills of Alberta as well into the BC interior. I know there were some reports in Abbotsford of lightning earlier, and you definitely don't want to underestimate the threat of lightning. The biggest threat for these storms, though, moving through the prairies is the rainfall. You can see quite a lot of moisture coming out of the south, and all said and done, these storms have actually spawned rainfall warnings. We'll be dealing with the wet weather right through your weekend, so it is quite possible to see 30 to 60 plus millimeters north of the Pas. I know earlier one of our meteorologists saying it's not impossible to rule out seeing 70 millimeters of rain. And with that, the big concern, of course, is localized flooding, ponding on roads. If you are traveling and you encounter one of these storms, visibility can be quite poor, so don't put yourself in danger. Now, Winnipeg, I know it's your Canada Day weekend, but it is looking quite unsettled right through Monday. Things do start to improve, though, for the latter half of your week. Canada Day itself, the sunshine should make an appearance, but cooler. It will be producing a tornado, but certainly rainfall. Quite a risk there, as well as the risk of seeing some hail. Thanks so much for joining us on this active evening at the Weather Network. I'm Krissy Vann in for Gary Archibald. And as you can see through the prairie provinces, that has been our main focus as we have this swath of storms moving through southern Alberta. Now, the biggest threat that we had earlier was just in this pocket here, further to the west. But we do now see these storms tracking northeast, moving along quite slowly. And as a result, the biggest risk with them are torrential downpours. This, of course, can cause localized flooding, ponding on the roads, and creating a dangerous situation. High winds as well a factor. So you can see up there, Brandon, that's one of the areas that we do have severe thunderstorm warned. At the bottom of your screen, you could see that ticker. There are multiple severe thunderstorm watches and warnings in place. Some areas that we are really keeping an eye on right now, Brandon, Sydney, Sandy Lake, all included in that, and we're going to continue to watch these storms track northeast coming up out of the south. So our biggest risk of severe weather this evening through southeastern Saskatchewan, southwestern Manitoba, but we're also seeing some active conditions through the foothills of Alberta, as well as a risk of thunderstorms through the BC interior. Now, the storms in the prairies, as mentioned, rain, quite a risk as it's going to be coming down in large amounts over a short period of time. And as a result, we do have rainfall warnings in place for areas like Winnipeg, Brandon included in this as well. Locally, you could see around 50 millimeters fall. And we have these storm systems lingering around throughout the weekend. So you could see locally higher amounts in thunderstorms. So areas through Tuesday into Thursday in Atlantic Canada have also been dealing with the wet weather. Some good news, though, those systems have been pushing east, so it's looking like it's going to be a dry Canada Day weekend for you. Eye on those storms because this rainfall warning in place through Saturday. We have this low pressure system that's moving through, another system arriving tomorrow, and that's what's going to be causing things to remain unsettled for you. So Winnipeg and Brandon both included within that rainfall warning. 30 to 60 millimeters possible, but we could see even more with it locally higher in thunderstorms. Coming up, that has since been dropped, and as you can see throughout Saskatchewan, a lot of that activity has really dissipated. On the radar itself, though, of course, the big focus of this evening has been throughout Manitoba, and you can see we're still seeing some wet weather move through around Dauphin, some heavier bands of rain, but all those severe thunderstorms, watches and warnings have been dropped, which is excellent news. So the thing is, we still have a risk of seeing that activity. So through the pre-dawn hours, you can see that extends right through Manitoba and even through parts of Saskatchewan as well. Have to be on the lookout. And not only that, through the foothills of Alberta and in through the BC interior, we do have the risk of seeing some isolated non-severe thunderstorm activity. Now, all this activity that we've been seeing throughout the prairies has been because of this front here. And as it continues to push east, it's just going to generate more activity, but everything's going to be moving to the north and east. So where we're going to have to keep an eye as we head into the rest of your weekend is going to be through southeastern Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. Going to be looking on Saturday at a risk of seeing some isolated severe cells develop. And then we still have this risk of some isolated non-severe that extends quite a distance right through Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Now, we had to Lumsden, Saskatchewan, where they had plenty of rainfall on Thursday. And if you look at those little puddles on the road there, that's the big thing that you need to watch out for driving around with these types of thunderstorms. What we saw move through Manitoba today, they were very slow moving, and as a result, they can drop a lot of rain in a short amount of time. So even though the thunderstorm watches and warnings have dropped, all this activity that you're still seeing, if you're traveling within those communities, you have to be careful because localized flooding, certainly an issue. I know that there have been some flood warning and watches rather, and we do have this rainfall warning in place. So Winnipeg, Brandon, you're all a part of this. You could be seeing upwards of 50 millimeters of rain. Speaking of rainfall, BC seeing a wet weekend, but drying out for your Monday. Not to make light, Nicole, of the image that you showed us there of someone at the gas bar with the funnel cloud in the distance, but isn't it a little nice to see something a little scarier than the gas prices these days? Why is it they always go up around the long weekend? I don't know. Now, throughout the evening, I've been with you. We've been talking about these thunderstorm watches and warnings. As Nicole mentioned, all of those have been dropped, but the rainfall certainly still a threat. And this whole system's been bubbling out of the south and then moving slowly northeastward, and slowly that has been the key ingredient of spawning all this rainfall because they are tracking so slowly. And when the storms come through, they can drop a lot of rain in a short amount of time. So taking a close look through southern Alberta, you can see why they're still in that widespread rainfall warning. And Winnipeg, Brandon, you're all included in this. A lot of the thunderstorm activity has cleared out, but we still have a risk into the pre-dawn hours. So that extends through southern Manitoba, in through South Saskatchewan, and then as well as we take a look through the foothills of Alberta and into the BC interior. Now we head to Lumsden, Saskatchewan, where they had their fair share of wet weather move through on Thursday. And I want to take note, those big puddles that you're seeing on their roadway there. That's what we talk about. You have to be really careful traveling around when you're getting heavy amounts of rain a short amount of time, because the driving conditions on the road can literally change in an instant. So things to watch out for this weekend if you're traveling in the prairies: reduced visibility, a big one, and then of course localized flooding and ponding on the roads. In fact, there have been some flood watches and warnings for some areas as well. As you can see, we are watching this activity though on the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border. In Saskatchewan yesterday, there was a rainfall warning. Those have since been dropped. Where the warnings are, though, they've shifted into Manitoba. So as I said, Winnipeg, Brandon, all included, and it really does encompass quite a large area. So how much rain? Well, Numbers you see here will be locally higher in thunderstorms, but areas could get upwards of 30 to 60 millimeters plus. So unfortunately, if you had that Canada Day barbecue plan, the weekend not exactly looking the best. The day, though, is Canada Day itself, where you're finally going to see the return of the sunshine. The humidity is going to dissipate, and it's going to be feeling a lot cooler. More on the active weather coming up right here. Warning has since been dropped and all the attention has shifted to Manitoba. And as you can see, although those non-severe and severe thunderstorm warnings have dropped, we're still seeing this swath of rain that has been tracking northeastward, bubbling up out of the south, and it's going to be lingering for some time, unfortunately, throughout the start of your Canada Day weekend. So it's going to continue pushing to the north and the east, and that's going to create a situation as we roll into the weekend where northwestern Ontario may have the risk of some isolated severe and non-severe thunderstorms as well. But for the pre-dawn hours, the focus still remains throughout southern Manitoba, stretching in through Saskatchewan, and then we also have to keep an eye on through the foothills of Alberta and into the BC interior, foreseeing those non-severe thunderstorms. Again, rain being the main focus with this weather, so rainfall warnings in place for areas like Winnipeg, Brandon, and really stretching across quite a wide area, 30 to 60 plus millimeters possible for some of you. But don't worry, Winnipeg, if you're planning the Canada Day barbecue, Tuesday looking like the best day. Coming up, Kim McDonald will have more on this active weather.